Hey everybody, welcome to the Prometheus and Ecosystem Community Meeting. Today is June 7th. We have a couple of interesting new things that happen in the Prometheus organization, and then we also have some updates from the Thanos project. That's also a CNCF project, so quite exciting with all of that. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody that we are following the CNCF code of conduct, so be excellent to each other. And yeah, I think that's that. We had two releases since we last met in March, which was the 2.43 and 2.44 release. And I have opened up the 2.43 release right here. Should be coming up. Let me make it slightly bigger. And yeah, I think there weren't too many crazy things happening. It was mostly a, kind of like a release that kind of had this like overarching theme that finally then shipped as default in 2.44 that Brian can tell us more about, which are the string labels, but otherwise some new features to the scraping configuration, to the HTTP client. You can configure a bunch of more things, and overall improvements. I think nothing too crazy. It was more of a good release, but yeah, nothing groundbreaking, I think, overall. And I think, yeah, the more exciting release in terms of user, what users can expect was the 2.44 release. And Brian is actually the release shepherd, so you want to tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, so we changed the implementation of the labels data structure. Labels as in the name of the metric, job, namespace, pod, whatever. And basically reducing the overheads from Go. But I mean, it's kind of a funny name, string labels. They were always strings, but instead of having like separate strings for all the name values, we have one string and they're all kind of stuck together in that one string. Most people reported an improvement. I mean, it's a little bit hard to tell because what your memory tends to go down straight after you restart Prometheus, and then it comes back a bit as compactions happen. But I think most people were reporting somewhere between 20–40% improvement. And also the CPU got better because of a few of the other things listed there, like scrape reduced memory allocations on target labels. Yeah, so I think it was a good thing for reducing resource consumption of Prometheus.
Yeah, definitely. And it was a long time in the making, right? You started this effort a long time ago. Exactly. No, but it's really cool. And I think the biggest change is that, as you said, like it's finally, it was shipped before, but now like it's enabled, or like we have the build tags enabled by default, so everybody gets that for free, kind of just upgrading to 2.44 as a release, right? And yeah, I just like pulled up the PR where people kind of like went ahead and posted some screenshots of what they were seeing in terms of CPU and memory. And I think what you said, between 20 and 40%, like we've also seen like basically a 1/3 drop. So we're down like to 2/3 just by upgrading to 2.44 as a release. That's pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Anything to point out otherwise with this release?
No, I mean, that's a bunch of things listed. Oh, the remote write default samples per send went from 500 to 2000. So if you use Thanos receiver or Cortex or other similar projects, then what this sort of reduces the overhead, because there's a certain cost of setting up a send, and if if you're sending 1 million metrics, then sending them in groups of 2,000 is a little bit cheaper than sending them in groups of 500.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so something for people, as you said, that use a lot of remote write in various different projects and places. Nice. All right, cool. Yeah, I think following the agenda, we can also quickly talk about the node exporter. There was a 1.6 release 2 weeks ago, and yeah, mostly I think I kind of briefly went over this. There are improvements to how CPU metrics are collected and reported. The NTP collector, if anyone is using that, has been deprecated. Bunch of things here and there, which are always good to see. But I think overall, also node exporter going on a mostly stable path right now, and nothing too major in the past 3 months there. So yeah, go ahead and try the 1.6 release and see if there's anything that you might need to change. But I don't think we can expect much except improvements. Yeah, and then I think, yeah, Brian, you want to talk about kind of an upcoming thing for Prometheus, because that already has been most of what we had as releases and announcements for Prometheus. No alert manager release, for example. And I mean, I can quickly tease that we're probably going to have a PromCon later this year. It's going to be in Berlin, but we are yet to confirm most of the things. But that's going to happen eventually, and stay tuned for that one. So I think that's one of the major things that are going to be announced in the next weeks. So that's pretty exciting. But yeah, there's something else more technical that Brian wants to talk about for Prometheus.
Well, I put it in the list. It's in as a suggestion right now because my account didn't seem to have permission to edit that doc. But the so a lot of people coming from different metrics systems want to have names with a different character set. Prometheus does not allow dots, is the most common one, but also we don't allow Chinese characters, we don't allow accented characters, we don't allow a bunch of things. So people have been kind of debating this for years and years and years. This is the most recent debate, is in this document. So I just wanted to kind of publicize that. And the fact that OpenTelemetry, I think, is mandating dots in names makes it more important that we do something about this. So there is some work underway, people experimenting with changing the parser and so on. So I just wanted to raise awareness of that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's, yeah, for the reasons that you said, now a bit more pressing again with OpenTelemetry and overall compatibility. I can see how that makes sense. Nice. All right, yeah, if anyone's interested, the link to this document is in our agenda document for the Prometheus and Ecosystem community meeting. So you can find it there under the June 7th notes. Thank you for bringing that up, Brian. Then I think we're done with the Prometheus and team updates. I think we can kind of move forward with the ecosystem. But yeah, I mean, you are going to talk about Thanos stuff, Philip, but maybe you have some other things first.
Yeah, I thought if I can ask a question
Sure.
about the string labels change, and also some of the PRs that are currently, I think, open or still in draft. So the string labels change essentially changes the internal format of how strings are represented, but it also, I don't know if it changes the wire format as well, and whether it's something that, so if we send strings as they are to external components, do we have to are we going to send them with this new internal format, or is the kind of wire format going to stay the same? I don't know if that that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand the question. So the format that is now in 2.44 was inspired by the wire format, actually. And I toyed with the idea of making it exactly the same as the wire format. Anyway, the wire format doesn't change. The for remote read, remote write, which I guess is the only, well, the JSON format is the only other wire format. So none of those change.
Okay.
There would be a CPU reduction to use the so-called string labels format on the wire, because you wouldn't have to do much work to encode and decode. I personally want to go to the next step to what I'm using the term symbol tables that I think some other people have used to try and avoid repeating copies of the same string. So I have a draft PR 12304, I think, implementing that. And well, you probably know more than I do the work that was done in Thanos to do that kind of thing. So I think that's a better place to go to. I think we shouldn't change the wire format very often. And I think we get a big benefit from getting to symbol tables, whereas we get a sort of modest benefit from changing to the one that's in 2.44. But that's my opinion. I mean, someone should try it out, basically. Full disclosure, I'm still trying to get the string labels change into Mimir, which is a related project I work on. It is the number of dependencies and things that need knocking on the head is just vast, and it's a real drag. So here we are.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have we have some call them hacks, other call them like smart workarounds to kind of do no allocations when transferring from one data type to another, things like that. So with string labels, that kind of changes. And I was wondering if if the wire format is going to change in the future, maybe especially with the symbol table coming up, maybe we can wait a bit before we make certain breaking changes so that we don't have to make them again, things like that. But yeah, I can understand that everything's kind of still in the air. It's kind of hard to predict ahead of time where.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would love is somebody try out a few of these variants. And that's another thing that is incredibly time consuming is coding it up in the first place is time consuming, but then you really have to try it out in different situations, different data. And so there's a bunch of things I find interesting, like instead of using protobuf, use flat buffers or something like that. There's a bunch of competing tools in that area. Maybe one of them would be much more efficient. But it's even more work to kind of do all the right experiments to figure out what's the most efficient.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Yeah, good question. Like we definitely have in another project we went from exactly what you said, like sending strings over and over again, to like symbol tables, and that made all the difference. I think that wire format had like even more strings compared to what Prometheus is going to have, but I can still see the benefit for Prometheus. And I think we're talking about like we reduced like the string usage by like 90%, so we're down to like 10% left of the amount of strings we had to send over the wire in the end. Again, like I don't expect it probably to be as much for Prometheus wire format, but I think I can still see it making a lot of sense there. Yeah. All right, let's not bike shit on this too much. But I love the conversation regardless, so we could spend some time on it. But yeah, let's talk about the ecosystem. And I think for the most part, Thanos, Philip, you have put in some things to the agenda. Feel free to go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so I kind of put in things which I thought were kind of things that are worth pointing out. The changelog is fairly big for 0.31 and also for 0.30. I don't think we've talked about that in the last meeting. But yeah, similar, like with Prometheus, there aren't any big bang changes or anything like that. Mostly quality of life improvements. One interesting thing is that the Thanos store, which kind of acts as a TSDB adapter for object storage, can run without an attached disk now. So you can run stores without any kind of external dependencies, which might be beneficial for users that have like large clusters and run into quota limits with their cloud provider and stuff like that. We've also added kind of a way to limit how much data you can pull over when querying metrics, basically. So there are limits for both number of requests and number of samples that you can query in a single request. Also, some people run what we call like identical stores. So for kind of high availability, they will have two store gateways that have the same TSDB blocks. And in the past, Thanos would basically do a fan out across both. But now we've added a feature where these kind of two store gateways will be treated as replicas, and we will do client-side load balancing across them, which kind of helps you also scale things up a bit. Yeah, and finally, there's a new feature so Thanos has this concept of downsampling, where over time we produce aggregates for 5 minutes and 1 hour kind of window of resolution. And now, if you have blocks that you don't want to have to be downsampled, you can also basically create a marker for those blocks, and the compactor is going to skip them. So that's kind of 0.31. I'll also kind of want to briefly talk about things that we're still kind of working on or have landed in main but are not released yet. Most notably, we have a new feature that allows a Thanos tenant or kind of any tenant to have additional external labels. So traditionally, in the receiver component, when you create a new tenant, that tenant will only get an external label with the tenant ID. And now, thanks to a contributor that we got through the LFX program, we can attach additional external labels to tenants. There have also been various like index caching improvements that again are in main but have not been released yet. And also there's a way to visualize query execution where when you execute a query through the UI, you can see kind of the query plan that the query engine creates, and hopefully in the future you'll also be able to see how much time each let's say PromQL function takes. So how much time is used up by the rate function, how much time is used up by the sum function, and so on. We're still kind of working on adding native histogram support. So this is a fairly big feature, like everything basically has to change. And there are still open PRs that have to be merged. And finally, we are kind of at a point where we think we have an acceptable implementation of distributed query execution. So for context, in Thanos, one querier can talk to multiple other queryers. So what we can do now is this kind of querier at the top can partition a query into fragments, and it can delegate fragments to different queryers. So if you run in like a decentralized mode where you have data split by cluster or by region, the root query can then push down aggregations to the queryers that are responsible for their own region. So it's kind of similar to how Google Monarch works. So yeah, that's it from our side. Those were the updates that we had.
Great. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the distributed query engine. That's really, really cool. But all the other stuff sounds fantastic as well. Yeah, I've seen the PR to add native histograms. It's massive. I guess it's similar to how Brian said, like changing something in Mimir like has so many implications right down the line. So I guess it's the same for Thanos as well. Nice. Any questions? Welcome to everybody who joined a bit later. All right. I think if we don't have questions, we can open it up for just Q&A on what happened in the last couple of months of Prometheus or Thanos or anything slightly Prometheus related. There are questions. All right. If there are no questions, then we will see each other again in September already. And yeah, I don't think there's much happening in between in terms of events. I'm thinking no KubeCons, no PromCons, etc. So yeah, we'll see each other online again next time. And then hopefully we can have another PromCon, and then there will be a KubeCon, etc. So we'll see each other in person, but until then we can meet again in September to look at what has happened in the next 3 months in these projects in the ecosystem. All right. Thank you for joining, everybody. Yeah, again, feel free to join next time. Let us know if there's anything you want to like point out or discuss next time for updates. I'm always happy to add something to the agenda. Feel free to propose something on the document as well. And with that, we can wrap it up. All right. Have a great, wonderful local time. Enjoy the summer for everybody who's in the Northern Hemisphere. I know not everybody is, but yeah. See you in 3 months. Right? Bye-bye.